A while back, I made a guide explaining every single stim in EFT, but since then, new stims have been added, stats have changed, and so have my opinions. So today, I'll be taking you through an explanation of every single stim in EFT as of patch 14.1.1. Before we get into it, you can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/GiantBoostsock or on TikTok under the same name. As for the order of how we'll go through the list, we'll be starting with the more commonly used ones, followed by the less commonly used. For each, I'll share the buffs and debuffs it provides, the best scenario for its use, if it's required for a quest, if it can be crafted, and its typical sell value to both traders and on the market. Starting off with the most basic and most common stim in EFT, let's talk about Morphine. It provides the painkiller effect for 305 seconds and removes any concussion or pain. For debuffs, it reduces your energy by 10 and hydration by 15. It should be noted here that all stims are one-time use and have a use time of 2 seconds. To summarize Morphine, it's basically just a quick-use painkiller that'll last you 5 minutes. If I have some to use, I'll often hotkey one and use it at the start of a labs or a factory raid in order to quickly get my painkiller activated and move off my spawn. If I find one in raid, I'll often just pop it right away since it isn't really worth taking up the slot in my stim case due to its low value, ruble, and functionality-wise. As for quests, you'll need to find 4 found in raid for Therapist's Quest Painkiller and 4 more found in raid for Peacekeeper's Quest Spa Tour Part 7. They can be crafted at Med Station Level 2, and for sell prices, average market price is 16 to 20k, while Therapist sell price is 16k. Next up is Propital, which is by far my most used stim. It also removes concussions and serves as a painkiller, but for slightly less time at 245 seconds. It also provides a 20 level increase to metabolism, health, and vitality, and most importantly, regenerates your health for 1 point a second. For debuffs, after 270 seconds and for a duration of 30 seconds, it causes both a tremor and tunnel vision. Honestly, not bad debuffs for the amount of benefits they provide. I often will pop a Propital before I'm about to push a player so that I have both painkillers and some passive healing occurring while I fight. I also often use one when I've taken damage across all body parts, since it can waste a lot of time performing the medkit heal animation repeatedly only for a couple points of healing per body part. They can be crafted at Med Station Level 3 using ibuprofen, golden star, and 2 piles of meds, but the ibuprofen and golden star can be utilized with only 1 use left. Propital sells to therapists for 13,000 rubles and market price fluctuates greatly from 25 to 50k. They are not needed for a quest. Next is the SJ6. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you want to run a long distance without draining stamina, this is a stim for you. For 240 seconds, your maximum stamina will be increased by 30, and your stamina recovery rate will be boosted by 2 points per second. For debuffs, after 200 seconds and for a duration of 40 seconds, you'll experience a tremor and tunnel vision. I often use these on maps when I want to go far away from my spawn fast. The classic example is Shoreline. If you want to get to Resort quickly off spawn, pop an SJ6 and you'll be able to get there quickly. Reserve is another map where I'll commonly use one upon loading in, but usually only if I have spawned far away from the action. Sometimes I'll use one right away in labs too, to allow me to reach my opponent's spawns much more quickly. You'll need 8 found in raid for Mechanics Quest Assessment Part 3, one of the quests leading to the Lightkeeper quest line. 2 can be crafted at a time at Med Station Level 3. For selling, therapists will pay just under 18k, while market prices fluctuate from 50 to 70k, sometimes even higher. Next up is Trimadol, another one of my favorite stims. You can think of it as a combination of Morphine and SJ6. For 180 seconds, it does all of the following. Removes concussions and acts as a painkiller, increases endurance, strength, attention, and stress resistance by 10 levels, increases max stamina by 10, and increases stamina recovery rate by 3 per second. For debuffs, at the same time of the buffs and for the same duration, energy recovery and hydration recovery are both decreased by 0.5 points a second. Typically, I'll use these the same way as I do in SJ6, but most often I'll save them for labs. It saves me 2 seconds or so to just pop 1 stim and get all the buffs I need to move off spawn and push PvP. Just be prepared to eat and drink pretty soon after the effects wear off. None are needed for quests and they cannot be crafted. Therapists will pay you 37k for one and they can be sold on the flea for 70 to 90k. Next up, we have the ETG, which I consider to be one of the best life-saving stims in the game. It removes concussions, and for 60 seconds, provides a hefty 6.5 points of healing per second, as well as an added 0.5 points per second of energy recovery. Additionally, for 90 seconds, metabolism and immunity are both increased by 20 levels. For debuffs, after 65 seconds, health and endurance will be reduced by 5 levels each for 60 seconds, and energy recovery will be reduced by 3 points per second for 20 seconds. I basically treat ETGs as my emergency situation stim. If my total health is dropped to around 100 in the middle of a fight, you can guarantee I'll be popping an ETG to bring that number back up quick. Another good scenario would be if I only have a point or two of health left on my thorax or head. Of course, you never want them to get blacked out, so sometimes the fastest way to get them healed back up immediately while under pressure would be an ETG. The downside of ETGs is the price. They only sell to therapists for $24K, but fluctuate between $80 and $110K on the market, so they're quite expensive to use. You can barter for one at therapist level 3 for 4 shampoos, but you typically don't save too much versus the market price. That being said, definitely don't start using them instinctively under pressure in fights, because they're not always necessary. They're not needed for any quests, but can be crafted at Med Station level 2 after completing Therapist's Quest Crisis. Next, we have another highly important stim, Zagustin. It removes and prevents both light and heavy bleeds for 200 seconds and increases vitality by 20 levels for 180 seconds. Debuffs are a decrease of the metabolism skill by 5 for 180 seconds, and after 170 seconds, and for a duration of 40 seconds, hydration recovery is decreased by 1.4 per second, and a tremor will occur. In my opinion, this stim has one great use case. If you just took a lot of damage and you see you have 3 or more active bleeds, it's definitely the perfect time to pop a Zagustin. Oftentimes, you can't stop all your bleeds fast enough via medkits and hemostats to prevent blacked out limbs, so Zagustins are the perfect remedy. While they do prevent bleeds for some time as well, I personally don't use them solely for that purpose because it can be a costly addition to the rest of the stims I'm already using. Therapists will buy Zagustins for $21K and they can be sold on the market for around $30K. They're not needed for any quest and cannot be crafted in the hideout. Mules are up next, serving as the carry capacity stim. For 900 seconds, they'll increase your weight limit by 50%, but will also decrease your health by 0.1 points per second. This debuff can easily be offset though, just by using a Propital. I don't use these much nowadays because if you find yourself heavy in raid, you can typically mostly handle it just by using an SJ6 or Trimadol. The cases I do find myself using them are when I'm above 80 kgs or so, because it can start to become a bit unbearable to move across the map at that weight. You'll need one of these for samples, and they can only be crafted at Med Station level 2 after completing Therapist's Quest Crisis. She'll only pay $27K for one, but they're sold on the market for $100 to $130K. Next up is Adrenaline, a stim that has a mashup of properties. It removes and prevents concussions for 60 seconds, serves as a painkiller for 65 seconds, increases endurance, strength, and recoil control by 10 levels for 60 seconds, and regenerates health for 15 seconds at 4 points per second. Debuffs are a reduction of the stress resistance skill by 10 levels for 60 seconds, and after 50 seconds and for a duration of 30 seconds, energy recovery is decreased by 0.8 per second, and hydration recovery is decreased by 1 point per second. There are lots of use cases for Adrenaline, and they're actually extremely common. If you want quick healing, it does the job super well. If you need a short-term boost of strength and endurance to make a jump or carry a heavy load, it does the job. If you simply want that extra recoil reduction for a fight, accompanied by a painkiller, it does that as well. The best part is that you can buy these on the market for around $20K, and Therapist pays about the same. They cannot be crafted in the hideout and are not needed for any quest. Next is Meldonin, a great alternative for SJ6s and Trimadols. For 900 seconds, it increases strength by 10 levels, endurance by 20 levels, and stamina recovery by 0.5 points per second. After 30 seconds, and for a duration of 900 seconds, it decreases energy and hydration recovery by 0.1 points per second. Overall, it is a little less powerful than an SJ6 or Trimadol, but lasts much longer, so it can really be used in any of the same situations. Whenever you need to travel a long distance without stopping to walk, or whenever you need to carry a heavy load. They sell to therapists for $35K and are priced slightly higher on the market at around $40K. One is needed for the quest samples, and they cannot be crafted. Next, we have the rest of the stims, all of which I don't really use often, either because another stim already does the job better, their use case doesn't happen often to me, or purely because I find it more worth it just to sell them. The L1 acts as a painkiller, increases endurance by 10 levels, increases strength by 20 levels, and increases max stamina by 30, all for 120 seconds. For 60 seconds, it decreases energy recovery and hydration recovery by 0.45 per second. I don't use L1s because I find that the stims like SJ6 can do the same job, but much more effectively. Sure, the L1 is cheaper, but I just don't think it's worth using since it doesn't have the stamina regen properties. So I typically just sell them. They sell both on the flea and to therapists for around $23K. One is needed for samples, and they cannot be crafted. XTG-12s serve one primary purpose, removing and preventing the poison caused by cultist knives. After a 6-second delay and for 60 seconds, the antidote buff will be applied. For the same amount of time, the health skill will be reduced by 5. There really isn't much to add for this one, just bring one along if you're planning to hunt cultists. They sell to therapists and on the flea for around 50k. They're not needed for a quest, but can be crafted at Med Station level 2 after completing Skier's task Night Sweep. The Perfotoran or Blue Blood stim is another stim with a mashup of properties. For buffs, for 60 seconds, it increases metabolism by 5 levels, stops and prevents bleeds, generates 1.5 health per second, and removes cultist poison. Debuffs are, after 60 seconds and for a duration of 60 seconds, a decrease of 15 levels of the health skill, and a decrease in energy recovery by 1.1 per second. Again, decent buffs, but there are other stims which do the job better for a lower price. They cannot be crafted and are not needed for any quest. They can be sold to therapists for around 41k and on the market for slightly more, around 45k. The AHF-1M increases the health skill by 5 levels and stops and prevents bleeds for 60 seconds, while decreasing hydration recovery by 0.3 per second for 120 seconds. It basically exists as a shorter duration alternative to Zagustin for a slightly lower price. Because of this, I typically just sell them if I find them. One needs to be found for samples, and one needs to be found if you plan on doing Colleagues Part 3. They sell to therapists and on the market for around 28k and cannot be crafted. The PNB injector is an odd one with slightly random properties, which struggles to find its place in the game. For 40 seconds, it removes concussions but does not provide a painkiller effect. For the same duration, it increases the strength skill by 20 and increases health regen by 3 points per second. After 41 seconds and for a duration of 20 seconds, it causes a tremor, and for 180 seconds, it decreases health and vitality by 20 levels. Its main benefit is the fairly fast health regen, but since it doesn't provide a painkiller effect, I feel there are always better options for your money, like Propital and Adrenaline. They sell on the market and to therapists for around 41k, cannot be crafted, and are not needed for a quest. The P22 is one of the least useful stims in the game, in my opinion. For 60 seconds, the stress resistance, health, and vitality skills will be boosted by 30, and after 65 seconds, for a duration of 60 seconds, endurance will be decreased by 10, and stamina recovery will be reduced by 0.8 per second. For the majority of stims, the level boosts provided are not necessarily the highlight of their functionality, and those are the only types of buffs the P22 provides. If you have one on hand, it could potentially help you to survive a fall a little more easily due to the health skill boost, but that's about it. Again, it's more worth it to just sell it if you find one, in my opinion. They sell for around 25k to therapists and on the market, and cannot be crafted, but one is needed for the samples quest. The SJ1 exists in a similar way to the P22, providing simple level boosts. For 180 seconds, it increases strength, endurance, and stress resistance by 20, and after 100 seconds, and for a duration of 200 seconds, decreases energy recovery by 0.2 per second, and hydration recovery by 0.3 per second. Again, all the buffs it provides are already provided more effectively by other stims, so the SJ1 is best used as one of the crafting components for SJ6s. They can also be crafted themselves at Med Station level 2. They can be sold to therapists for around 22k or sold on the flea for around 50k. 20 of them will be needed to be found for Mechanics Quest Assessment Part 3. The 3BTG is another odd level boost stim. For 240 seconds, it increases attention and perception by 30 levels, strength by 10 levels, and stamina recovery by 1 point per second. After 120 seconds, and for a duration of 120 seconds, energy recovery is reduced by 0.25 per second. And after 220 seconds, for a duration of 45 seconds, a tremor will occur. If you want slightly faster looting or slightly longer hearing distance for a couple of minutes, you can totally use this stim. You can also combine it with another endurance-related stim for the extra stamina recovery, but I feel like it's rarely worth it. Again, I just prefer to sell them. They sell for 19k to therapists and for around 40k on the market. They cannot be crafted, but one is needed for samples, and another one is needed if you plan to do Colleagues Part 3. Obdolbos stims I never recommend using under any circumstance, aside from the times they're associated with some special event or pre-wipe event. They have a 25% chance to provide a variety of buffs and debuffs, but one of the debuffs is instant death. This means you have a 25% chance to die instantly upon use, so I highly recommend you don't bother with it. They can be sold to therapists and on the market for around 39k and cannot be crafted, but one is needed for samples. The Obdolbos 2, while sharing the same name as the original version, should not be viewed as similar. For 1800 seconds, it provides 20 levels to endurance, strength, attention, and perception, and increases weight limit by 45%. For the same amount of time, max stamina is reduced by 20, stamina regen is reduced by 1 per second, and health regen is reduced by 1 per second. While the buffs initially do seem great, the stamina debuffs definitely hinder the benefits greatly in my opinion. Additionally, the constant health loss for 30 minutes can be a pricey thing to keep up with, especially if you're constantly utilizing Propitals. It sells for $42K to therapists and for around $60K on the market. It's not needed for any quest and cannot be crafted. The SJ9 is another stim with a single use case. For 300 seconds, it lowers your body temperature by 7 degrees, making you slightly harder to be seen on thermals. For the same time, metabolism is reduced by 20, and for 420 seconds, health will be reduced by 0.1 per second, and a tremor will occur. Also, after 300 seconds, and for a duration of 120 seconds, the pain effect will occur. Just to use a stim, you need to worry about carrying extra food, you need to utilize another stim to offset the healing, and you need to have a painkiller active. All of this in order to potentially make yourself harder to see for an opponent who may or may not be using a thermal. To me, it just isn't worth it. SJ9s sell to therapists and on the flea for around $56K and cannot be crafted, but 2 are needed found in raid for assessment part 3. Lastly, we have the SJ12. For 600 seconds, perception is increased by 30 levels, energy and hydration recovery are increased by 0.05 per second, and body temp is reduced by 4 degrees. After 606 seconds, and for a duration of 300 seconds, body temperature is then raised by 6 degrees, supposedly making you slightly easier to be seen on thermals. Again, most of this is negligible aside from the energy and hydration regeneration. This is a great stim to use somewhere like labs where it can be hard to find food and water at times, or just to have on hand for any emergency situation where you find yourself without food or water. I pretty much always have food or water on me though, so I don't find a need to use this stim, and actual food is much cheaper anyways. They can be sold to therapists for $25K or on the flea for around $75K. They cannot be crafted and are not needed for a quest. And that's all of them. Hopefully this serves as a proper updated guide you can refer back to for any questions about stims. I'd like to add in, if you have trouble finding any of these stims for any reason, just get Black Keycard. I know labs is tough, but there's no easier way to find them than in Black Room. As always, if you have any questions or suggestions, please let me know in the comments below. But thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.